Were we waiting on Mark?
No.
No? Okay. Brian, whenever you're ready.
And can you please silence your phone if you haven't done so already?
I've already done so.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us today. This is our Position 3 City Council endorsement interview. Just a couple ground rules. We do not guarantee equal time, so we have more questions for one candidate over the other. That's just kind of how it is. We have a lot to get through today, so if we interrupt you during a lengthy answer, we don't mean any disrespect, even if it comes off that way. We just got to keep things moving. And then this is not structured as a debate, but if you are welcome to respond to each other. We would ask, though, that you try to limit interrupting one another. Just let the other person finish their thought, then you can chime in. All right, we're going to start with you, Commissioner. Can you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and why you're running for council?
Yes, good morning. I'm Joanne Hardesty. I'm running for my second term on Portland City Council, and I'm running because I want to continue to institutionalize the enormous changes that I've been able to make in just 3 years and 9 months on council. I believe that everyone in the city of Portland should have safe, affordable housing. I believe that as a city, we should make sure that working people can continue to live in this city. And I believe that we should make sure that as we come back, that we make opportunity for everyone to come back from COVID.
Okay, thank you. Renee.
You're welcome.
Renee Gonzalez, running because I'm deeply concerned about declining livability in the city we love. Very concerned about the ability to raise children in the city, that our youngsters will return. Really focused on the dual challenges of crime and the unsheltered, and our inability to confront either of those effectively in this era. And believe the city's at an inflection point in its history. We've had a lot of tailwinds for much of my adult life here, but much of that is in question at this moment in time. And so in the short term, really looking to restabilize the city, and at the same time make the space to plan what a post-pandemic city looks like, what a post-pandemic Portland looks like. And some of that's at a level of abstraction, some of that's taking into account the shifts in the way people live and work post-pandemic, but some of it may be re-embracing some of the beautiful elements of our city. Our commitment to parks, public transit, biking, an urban core, civic engagement, and a nice Portland have all been cornerstones of our city for a long time. And while I'm not sure what a post-pandemic Portland fully looks like, I think we'll be leaning in on some of those elements as we define them.
What do you mean by nice Portland?
We're a pretty polite city. For much of my adult life. Sometimes we're passive aggressive. Sometimes that means we don't put things on the table as effectively as we should. I've done business deals all over the world, all over the country, and come back to Portland, and we're pretty civil in how we engage typically. That is a positive characteristic about our city. At the same time, sometimes that means we fail to address some underlying issues. And I'd say in recent years, the contrast between the way many of us engage on difficult issues and a subset that doesn't engage that way, the contrast is really stark.
Thanks.
Where do you think the city is wasting money right now on homelessness? And how would you approach it differently? Where would you put the city's money?
Well, fundamentally, and you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again, I think we homogenize a highly segmented population in how we diagnose the issue and treat it as an affordability crisis. And when you look under the hood, we have nearly 80% of our unsheltered are suffering from some form of disability, 1 in 2 mental illness and addiction, a substantial number are suffering from both. And so if we can't solve a problem if we don't clearly define it. And so at the city level, when it comes to commitment to the joint Office of Homelessness, let's start there. We're putting essentially aside 45 to 50 million, depending on the year that goes there. We're very much tied to a housing first philosophy that's reflected at the county level, and when I look at that data in terms of who are the unsheltered on our streets and the high rates of disabilities there, we have to treat those as the #1 causes. And I don't mean to oversimplify. There are multiple segments in our unsheltered population, but trying to build long-term housing to address addiction and mental illness is a fool's errand, in my opinion.
So what would you do as a counselor specifically to address mental illness and addiction?
Well, so mental illness is largely a state and county delivery model. All we can do at the city level is scream on high that there's adequate dollars and services for adult mental illness services in the entire state. So that's being very, very strong advocates for that. With respect to addiction, however, we were all promised with Measure 110 that there'd be substantial addiction services throughout the state. That's been incredibly slow to roll out. Multnomah County, by one count, was going to be the last to see material dollars distributed. And we had a pre-existing addiction crisis in the city of Portland. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic. It's been exacerbated by Measure 110, in my opinion. So there, again, it's advocacy as a city that we are making sure those dollars come online. In terms of discretionary dollars, however, the dollars that we can actually control and deploy, it's got to be shelter first and safe sleeping spaces first. And that's to disrupt the inhumane status of the folks on our streets right now, on the one hand. And second, it allows us to take steps to enforce existing bans on outdoor camping. And just as a reminder, since 1981, it has been illegal to sleep in unsanctioned camp in the city of Portland. That's old law. It's been around a long time in the city, and certainly we could go through all the twists and turns as to why that's no longer enforced. Ninth Circuit law, Oregon law, and a number of local decisions along the way. But I think the end game has to be that we get back to unsanctioned camping, and to prohibit unsanctioned camping. And a part of that is offering, both from a legal perspective and from a humanitarian perspective, reasonable alternatives for shelter.
At some point, if people are resistant to shelter, do you think they should go into the criminal justice system?
Absolutely.
At what point, if you could carve out an example?
Yeah, so I'm going to get back to the point that our unsheltered, there are various segments in that population, right? So and let's start with two extremes. Single mom with kids finds their way onto our streets. That is a scenario that fortunately is pretty rare in the city of Portland. We actually do a pretty good job of getting that segment shelter historically, but if they find themselves on the streets and they don't feel safe going to a shelter for a variety of reasons, one of which is if it's a low barrier shelter, that they have real concerns about their own safety and the safety of their children, that is not a group we want to criminalize. We want to do everything we can to find them at their level and get them shelter. The other extreme, we continue to get a migratory element to the city of Portland that is attracted to our anything goes mindset, that has come here to do hard drugs on our streets. There are substantial numbers in that population that are contributing to our crime problem, often coming here with warrants outstanding.
Can you cite some, how do you know this?
And then we just did a recent ride-along with the police department, or with the police. There was 4 different interactions with unsheltered folks, and where there was a necessity for police interaction, some sort of criminal activity going on. And one had a warrant from the state of Washington outstanding. The warrant literally said, don't return them. Another from the state of California for arson. They did want them back. And so you look at our growth in our unsheltered population from 2019 to 2022. I don't mean to oversimplify. We had multiple factors there, including the pandemic. But Measure 110 at the same time, I fundamentally think we're attracting a really negative migratory component of our unsheltered population.
If you knew 2 years ago what Measure 110 would look like now, would you vote for it?
No.
Did you vote for it at the time?
I think I did. I think I did.
But you don't know for certain?
I don't know I think I did because, I've traveled to Amsterdam, I've traveled to Holland. I see, it's a beautiful city. I think they've been able to balance effectively moving away from criminalizing addiction, which I fully support, but they can still preserve a beautiful city. And I think Obviously, we've taken some wrong steps there in terms of balancing carrots and sticks for addiction services and engaging in hard drug use, but if we could unwind, I would.
Commissioner, would you still vote for it if you knew how it had turned out 2 years down the road?
I would still vote for it because the promise was decriminalization and treatment. And we got the decriminalization, but we didn't get the treatment side. And right now the treatment side is starting to roll out. I wish it had rolled out at the same time that the law took effect. But that is a crisis that we've had in Oregon for quite some time. So whether it's mental health treatment, we're still at the bottom in the United States for providing mental health services. And it is also true that we are we lack the beds when people need it. We know when people decide they want treatment, we need to get them into treatment right then, right?
How much harm do you think decriminalization has done? I guess, like, what do you see as the trade-off? How much harm do you think the delayed resources have?
I think the harm is that that law enforcement is taking a hands-off approach. When I read articles in the paper where a reporter can stand and watch drug deals taking place, but the police say that they can't do anything because of Measure 110, that is not being responsible for your job. We did not decriminalize selling drugs. We decriminalized personal possession of drugs.
Do you support increased policing along Stanton Street then?
I support the police actually. If drug deals are happening on a corner in any neighborhood and the community knows it and they call the police, I support the police going out and arresting people who are dealing drugs because today that is still illegal. Yes.
So during the reporting of this story, you know, we talked to neighbors. Your office had co-hosted a community safety forum addressing gun violence with the Community Safety Division. And we were told that one of your staffers, when especially black people in the community said, we want more of a police presence, your staffer shut down and did not engage.
I think that's a misrepresentation of what my staffer said. My staffer knew that police are not the solution to community safety. But in this particular case, why no one in their right mind who are watching drug deals take place all day, every day, in a specific location would say, well, the police shouldn't do anything about that. My staff did not say that the police should not actually do their job to actually prosecute people who are selling drugs. I mean, if a reporter can see it, why would the police not do a sting on that corner? The neighbor's been complaining for a long time, right? I'm not the police commissioner. If I was the police commissioner, I'd have picked up the phone and said, what are you doing?
Would you go to Chuck Lavelle and say, do a drug bust there tomorrow, if you could?
Well, it's not a drug bust. You go and arrest people who you see, it's not even a bust, right? What is it? You're arresting people because they're involved in criminal behavior.
Well, they could do a targeted drug mission where they do arrest however many people. Would you support that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sophie?
Yeah.
Can I back up and Renee on the homeless issue? Is there a city in this country that in your mind has got this figured out?
There's certainly, Houston was recently cited, and they labeled under a banner of Housing First, by the way, which is interesting language because their definition of Housing First is quite different than I think as it's been interpreted here in the city of Portland. But there's real challenges as to whether we can actually replicate that in the city of Portland for a number of reasons. But one, they sweep camps in Houston, Texas. I mean, they're actually fairly aggressive on it. They haven't engaged in sort of this false choice between housing and shelter. They actually embrace a great amount of shelter, including getting people in hotels or whatever they have to do to get shelter as quickly as possible. And while the goal is still ultimately that folks have stable housing, they recognize that sometimes you got to do shelter first to get them off the streets. Another variable, you compare Texas to Portland, this is the challenge. It's much cheaper to build in Houston than it is in Portland, Oregon. That allows the market to address the more economic drivers of homelessness. When you're talking about the people on the streets, how much that matters is still a little bit to be debated. But Houston, I think, has done a reasonably good job.
And Joanne, same question to you. Is there a city in this country that in your mind is a model for how to address the homeless?
I think Vancouver, Washington has done a pretty decent job. They've been very thoughtful about creating small, not self-managed, but managed by nonprofit villages where they provide services, people live there. They've done a better job than I think pretty much anybody in the region.
Vancouver, Washington.
Vancouver, Washington, yeah.
Why do you think we haven't been able to replicate? I mean, Dan Ryan's essentially trying to do that, right? But we have 1 open out of 6.
Yeah, well, why have we not been able to do that is a really good question. I don't know why it's taken over 2 years to open up 6 safe villages. You may know that I donated spot from PBOT immediately when he was looking for space. And we worked a deal with the Port of Portland to swap land because, the federal land has some restrictions on what you can and cannot do on those lands. I can tell you what I have learned in my 3 years and 9 months at the City of Portland is that the way we have actually created the joint office actually was not created in a way that to me makes sense. When I went back and looked at the intergovernmental agreement that Dan Salzman signed when he was in my role, it basically said we're going to give you $40 million a year and we're going to create this joint office. There was no measurable outcomes. There was no expectations about what the city would do and what the county would do. And so when I arrived and I started asking questions about, well, what are we getting for this 40 million plus a year? The best I could figure out was 200 shelter beds and 100 extra in bad weather. And that's why I refused to renew the intergovernmental agreement. I've been pushing Commissioner Dan Ryan to make sure the next one is clearly defines what the city's responsible for and what the county's responsible for.
Can you cite specific policies you've championed to address homelessness in the city?
Yes.
Besides Portland Street response?
Yes, I can tell you that it was because of me that we had the very first shelter for houseless people when COVID hit. I worked with the mayor's office to create 4 outdoor shelters.
Which ones?
It was the, what do we call them, the C3PO villages. Right? And we created them because as a city and county, we had abandoned people on the street with nothing when COVID hit. So it was me that did that. It was I that made sure that we wrote a budget note in the last budget that the next $10 million we're going to give to the joint office would be to buy something, right? Because what I saw during COVID was them buying hotel rooms that sat empty while people were suffering on the street. So I don't blame the county because honestly I think the city had been missing for a couple of years in this effort, and then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden all heck broke loose, right?
Do you think we need congregate shelters? Do you think that has a place in the city?
I think we need everything. You may remember Old Town was safest when Right to Dream 2 operated in Old Town. Right to Dream 2 was a self-managed camp, self-managed by houseless community members. They set their own rules, and the police will tell you they never got one call for service the entire time Right to Dream 2 was in Old Town, in that area, right? What I know is that when you give people dignity, they are, in fact, just temporarily unhoused, they can get themselves back on their feet. And so I want to see, and I've had this conversation with Mayor Wheeler over and over and over again, the sweeps that he's been doing are the most inhumane things that we could possibly do. Because here's what happens. Yes, you sweep a couple of 100 people and you call success, 20 of them took a bed. Well, yeah, 20 of them took a bed for the night, but where are they going to sleep tomorrow night? And guess what? A week, not even a week, they're back.
So what are you doing to to change that approach? I know you're pretty anti-sweep, but how are you going to make sure that people stay in shelters longer than one night? I mean, what are you specifically doing policy-wise or advocating-wise to counter that?
Well, as you know, I'm not the housing commissioner. All I can do is advocate with the mayor and with the housing commissioner, Dan Ryan. I am looking forward to the next Multnomah County chairperson will be vital. I believe the governor is going to be vital, and the next Multnomah County chairperson will be vital.
Have you endorsed in that?
I have
chair?
not.
Are you going to?
I'm not.
Are you going to tell us who you're voting for?
I'm not.
Well, it seems like if you think the chair is an important part of this equation and you think that will determine, it seems like that would be something that you would put your 2 cents into publicly.
Both of the candidates for Multnomah County chair bring qualities, good and bad. Whichever one of it is, whichever one becomes Multnomah County chair, I have a good relationship with. So that's why I did not weigh in.
Renee, do you know who you're going to endorse? Or will you?
Well, I've endorsed Tina Kotek for governor,
right.
And that's about reproductive freedoms and
Yeah.
her commitment to reasonable gun control. For county, I haven't endorsed. You know, I've listened to Sharon talk a number of times. I think at times her focus on shelter aligns pretty closely with mine. So if you're asking me right now, that's probably where I'm leaning right now. But subject to change, I haven't fully made my decision there.
So you recently said, I think it was in a press release, that Commissioner Hardesty's policies have created the downtown we see today. Can you explain which policies specifically?
Those are our words, exactly?
I don't know about it. I mean, that was the sentiment, is that the downtown conditions are because of policies that your opponent has pushed for.
Well, let's go through a couple of pieces. Defunding police, difficulty in recruiting and retaining police officers in the city of Portland, eliminating a number of specialists, very directly or indirectly. Joanne has had a piece in each of those. She co-chairs and I never get this darn acronym, but the joint, community council with Multnomah County on criminal justice, or co-leads it, depends on how they define it there. This has substantial impacts on things like sentencing guidelines and bail policy in the county. And so I think those are most directly impactful in terms of criminal justice. And with respect to the challenges in shelter, which have had a contributing factor on the decline in business environment and making the downtown unwelcoming, she has fought sweeps left and right. She's been very, very resistant to and sometimes demonizing neighborhoods and small business owners that are concerned about the ability of their businesses to function downtown, and much less for residents to be able to take back their sidewalks and their common areas. So I think most fundamentally on both making the city inhospitable to public safety officers and unwilling to confront unsanctioned camping really in any form has been extremely negative, has had an extremely negative impact on downtown. Last but not least, some of her comments during the riots were extremely unhelpful, including falsely accusing police officers of starting fires down there. That has, I think that added further fuel to that fire of the riots, and I say that metaphorically, that there was a lot of bad things done during those riots. The city, downtown has never really recovered from that, and I think we're still feeling the shadows today down there.
Commissioner, do you want to respond to any of that?
Well, let me say we had a riot one night downtown, and that was the night that we learned about George Floyd. I was downtown that night, and the mayor was out of town, so I was council president. I will say that as someone who is a public transit user, someone who walks my neighborhoods all the time, I share the same concerns that other people share of people who are suffering on our sidewalks. I share the same concerns that other people have about, how some areas of the city need economic support. But you may remember when COVID first hit, it was me as PBOT commissioner who actually made it easy for small businesses to survive by creating outdoor spaces with our Healthy Business program. We piloted things that we didn't know if it would work, but What that shows is that someone with my expertise, with my 30 years of experience of advocating in this city, in a time of crisis, I knew how to use the limited resources I had in my portfolio to actually help community members survive. There are many, many small businesses all over the city of Portland that will tell you, because of what we did, they are still in business today.
Thanks.
What I think we need to do to make downtown more vibrant and to help downtown come back is for the city of Portland to buy up all the derelict property that's downtown, put it into a public land trust, and restrict development to 60% of area median income for both commercial and residential. When I moved here 30 plus years ago, I could listen to live music just about every night of the week in different parts of the city. Today, the city of Portland is unaffordable for musicians, for creatives, et cetera, et cetera.
What money do we use to buy up all the derelict properties? Is that currently in our budget? Do we?
Yes, we have dollars that if we wanted to invest, we could have a huge impact by buying up properties right now.
With what money though?
With what money? With federal dollars, with dollars that we are now putting into Prosper Portland to do what Prosper Portland always does. We have the ability, if we have the political will, to actually just rethink what we think when we say economic development. Because again, this has to be a city where workers can afford to live.
Go ahead, Mark.
Can I get you to respond one more time to the comment Renee made about the comment you made during the riots in which you basically accused a police officer of throwing a Molotov cocktail? Which
yes.
obviously was extremely explosive. You have since apologized. At the same time, it has happened elsewhere in this country.
Yes.
But my question is, I can't imagine you just said that without any information. Someone must have told you this. What was your, at the time?
You may remember, it was a very highly emotional time.
Yep.
And what I had planned to say was, we know from the history of policing that police have been used to infiltrate civil rights groups, that we know that they have been provocateurs to come in and create violence and conflict. And I would not be surprised if in fact that history that we know well had been continued. But in the moment those words came out of my mouth, I regretted it because they were not in the context under which I wanted those words to come out. And it was I think it was like within a couple of hours, I sent out a public apology to the entire city. Because did I think in that moment that place was just setting things on fire? No. But it was the heat of the moment. And again, I don't think any of us have not said something in the heat of the moment that we've regretted. But I'm sure you haven't. But for me, I'm just a mere human, and sometimes the emotion gets the best of me. But that was that moment.
If we could pivot a little bit to gun violence and policing. Commissioner Hardesty, who do you think bears the responsibility for the increased gun violence in the city? Do you think city council leaders have any responsibility in that? I think that there are, I don't know that you can point to any individuals who are responsible. I think the responsibility is the economic collapse that so many people experience. And what we know in the history of this country, in economic uncertainty, violence goes up. And it's never had anything to do with how many police officers you have or how many specialty units that you have. So what I know is that in times of economic distress, when violence goes up, we traditionally as a society have a knee-jerk reaction of we need more police. But what we know is police don't provide housing, they don't provide mental health services, they don't provide alcohol and drug treatment. Do they help get guns off the street though?
I hope so. But as of yet, even with the new FIT, I have not received any information, which is why I finally actually appointed 3 people to that committee, because I have seen nothing in writing about whether or not having this team has had any impact on gun violence. So
you don't think there's any correlation between number of police and amount of gun violence in the city? Then why do you think, so what would happen if we had 0 police? Do you think gun violence would stay as it is right now?
Well, let me just say, I don't I don't imagine a society in my lifetime that would have no police. Police have a role, and police role is actually to solve crime.
Right, but specific to gun violence, if we had 5 police officers today, do you think we would see gun violence go up?
I can't answer that. Well, I don't know. Does that mean we would have nobody else would have guns, and we just have 5 officers with guns? I mean, I can't answer that.
Well, I can answer that. The crime would go up. I mean, you welcome chaos, you welcome vigilantes, you welcome retaliatory crimes if we do not have a police force in an urban setting. And so less police officers makes the city less safe.
I don't think that's true, and I can tell you why. What we know is that community safety is much broader than just police officers. A great example was the success we had in Mount Scott, Arleta. Community members said people were driving through after gun violence was taking place. They were zooming through their neighborhood. They felt unsafe. Working with that neighborhood, we now have a beautiful community space that is owned by the community, that will be maintained by the community. That is huge.
Didn't that pilot also include increased police patrolling?
No.
It had something to do with law. I mean, there was...
And so when we did the pilot, we've now concluded, right? We've now changed the intersection. We've increased the lighting at the convenience store. We've cut off a driveway that people were using at the church that would allow people to get out of the neighborhood early. So we made the infrastructure improvements that now allow for people to move through the neighborhood in a much safer way.
So increased patrolling had nothing to do with that?
In the beginning, we increased park patrols, we increased police patrols, we increased other community resources in that neighborhood. I'm not saying that the police, again, have a role. If there's gunshots, I expect the police to show up and try to identify who did the shooting, right? But what I'm saying is right now, today, that community they never said they needed more police. And today, they will tell you they don't need more police.
Looping back to Dawson Park real quick, now that we're sort of on transportation. So neighbors for 3 years have been asking for some sort of traffic diverter along Stanton to have a similar effect to Mount Scott, Arleta. And PBOT has told them, and this is via emails that we've seen, we're not going to put a diverter there because we don't want to block off access to a community place for the Black community. They're asking for that, and they've been asking for that for 3 years.
That has not made, that request has not come to my office.
I have an email to your office that asks for that PBOT diverter.
When? To me?
I can find it. I have
that. Again, I have not seen an email directed to me asking for that request. What I can tell you is PBOT has criteria under which we will accommodate these kind of transit improvements. I can tell you, PBOT has invested significant resources in that area around transportation improvements, and so again, I haven't seen the letter that they requested. I certainly did read the article that was written about the alleged disregard that my office had. But I
found the email, October 20th, 2021, to Commissioner Hardesty, CC'd all the commissioners. Dear Commissioner Hardesty, on behalf of the neighbors of Dawson Park, the Elliott, blah, 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 we believe formally request an emergency intervention on Northeast Stanton Street, i.e. the Mount Scott experiment. So almost a year ago.
Yeah, I did not see that email.
Okay.
And again, I would not be the one making that decision, right? You can't just come to the commissioner and say, fix this, because what I need to do is work with PBOT to make sure that it's in line with the vision and the direction that I've given them.
But that work didn't happen.
That did not happen in that case. No, I didn't see that email. And traditionally, people write everybody, then it's kind of hard to know if they're actually writing me directly. But you did say they wrote me, and I believe it. I'll ask my office when I go back what the response was. Because if they vote my office, I'm sure they got a response, and I'm sure the response...
They said they never got a response.
And I'm sure the response sent them back to PBOT.
Okay. Let's see. So I wanted to touch on 2 things. So, Commissioner Hardesty, why do you think the Fire Bureau didn't endorse you?
I think you have to ask Isaac that.
Sorry, union, not bureau.
Yeah, I understand. But let me say that there's no commissioner that's done more for fire than I have. And I will say that there was a request that that the union was trying to push through for double overtime that I was not, I did not push through, because I think it's bad public policy to pick out a small group of public employees and then pay them double overtime.
You mean double time?
No, double overtime.
So 3 times.
So what?
Because OT
Yeah,
is
double,
1.5. They're asking for 3 times?
They're asking for double. They were asking for double overtime. And you may, if you watched council yesterday, Commissioner Maps moved forward a proposal to do that for 911 call takers.
So 3 times their base salary.
I think you might want to double check that. I think it's 2 times.
it might be 2 times.
I think it's 2
like
times
double
base salary.
So if you're working overtime, you're working time and a half.
Right.
And if you're working double, and if you're being paid double that,
Right, so is it 2 or 3 times as much?
I know they want to get paid double time.
Okay.
Okay.
In order to-
Either way, they want to get paid more than the OT rate.
Yes.
That's what
Okay.
he's a little better.
Do you know how much currently the Fire Bureau is paying over this past fiscal year? Do you know how many hours or how much money it costs the Bureau to pay overtime?
I can tell you that, no, I can't tell you that right off the top. I could look it up, but I can't tell you that right off the top.
Do you know if it's increased over the past couple of years?
It certainly has increased, because for 2 years, firefighters took no leave at all, right? And so I got the city council to support adding $5 million so that we could actually pay overtime, so that firefighters could start taking leave. Because firefighters are on the front line of every single disaster that we've had since COVID started in 2019. And so when COVID hit, I made sure that we had the Portland State University Hotel set aside so firefighters wouldn't have to worry about infecting their family if they were exposed to COVID. So we've done a lot, I've done a lot as fire commissioner to really support firefighters. But I could not in good conscience, as someone who is responsible for the public resources, the limited public resources we have, I could not move that proposal forward.
And you think
So-
that's why you lost the endorsement?
I think that's why I lost the endorsement, but I also think they're very tied to police, and you don't have to ask me why the police wouldn't endorse me.
So my understanding, if we could loop back to Fire Bureau, my understanding is that when you guys renegotiated the contract, they got more paid, they got more leave, and they decreased the amount of hours worked per week by firefighter. That basically meant that the Fire Bureau, in order to fill all those shifts that they need to have filled, needed to hire 13 to 15 extra firefighters, and that calculus was not made in the budget. And now, this past year, mandatory overtime hours, so that means forced overtime by firefighters, has increased 275% since last year. And that's forced overtime. That means firefighters, they know they have the opportunity to make 1.5 times the pay. They don't want to do it, and they're forced, and if they don't, they're penalized.
Well, until recently, firefighters had no ability to hire lateral firefighters. If you were a firefighter in San Antonio and you moved to Portland, you had to start over. It was insane to me that police have always been able to hire laterally.
Right, and I know Chief Boone, started doing that this spring, but why weren't those calculations made earlier to hire up 2 years ago when that contract changed, when the Bureau knew that they were going to need 13 to 15 extra firefighters to fill those ranks, so firefighters didn't have to work 16,000 hours of forced overtime.
The plan had always been to have additional training classes that would actually help bring those bodies in. And we weren't able to do that when we were going from crisis to crisis to crisis. We're now starting again. We've had the first lateral firefighters are actually, we have 14 that have just graduated as of October 4th. They will be officially full-time firefighters. We have a second class that's coming in of lateral firefighters. Their training is shorter. We've just increased the compensation for the trainers of those lateral firefighters. In addition, we will have a brand new recruitment class. As you know, we just were awarded a federal grant that allows us to hire 6 additional firefighters so that we can reopen fully Station 23. Fire 911 The rest of our community safety system has been woefully underfunded for a long, long time. Prior to me arriving at City Hall, when we talked public safety, we only talked police, and when I would say, what about fire? You may remember my first term, I had 911 in my portfolio, and we did a massive hiring around bringing in new call takers, because this isn't a new problem with call takers, right? And so again, the city we continue to operate like very siloed, but that's why we have a community safety division now that is supposed to be looking at the entire system, because guess what? Police can't work without 911, fire can't work without 911, Portland Street Response, they're all in the system together.
Yeah. Renee, if we could pivot to you. So you came down pretty hard on Vadim in the primary for, having an IE crop up his campaign. Last week, the city fined you $77K for renting a space from Jordan Schnitzer, big time downtown developer. How is that different?
Yeah, so we have a technical disagreement with the small donor program. Before entering into that lease, we reviewed local rules and state law with respect to what constitutes an in-kind reportable transaction. In looking at state law, we concluded, which specifically allows, in some cases, vendors to provide services or items to candidates at their cost. It does not constitute a reportable in-kind transaction.
Sure, no, I understand the technical argument, but why you were so hard on Vadim was about ideology, right? It wasn't about technicality. There's nothing wrong with having an IE crop you up, but you said it was, he was basically accepting, favors from the power brokers. Again, not barred by anything. That was completely legal.
Yeah.
So let's forego technicalities and talk about ideology. How is you getting $250, paying that for 3,000 square feet of office space from Jordan Schnitzer, a big time developer? How is that different from Vadim getting an IE, which he had no control over?
Yeah. Is that I guess ideology? I'll come back to the use of that term in that context. But if the critique is the influence of the wealthy and the power brokers downtown on local elections, I think that's what you're saying. That was my critique of Vadim, and how does it apply here? And so what I'd say is, look, we're likely going to have another record in terms of small donor contributions to my campaign. I think we may end up beating Joanne in terms of the total number of donors that.
If you could get back to the specific question
I will.
Okay.
So the point being is there is broad communal support for my campaign. Vadim never approached that, right? We beat him in the small donor program handedly. And so to have power brokers come in and step in when in that scenario where there isn't broad communal support for a campaign was particularly galling. And so Jordan approached us, as did 3 other landowners over the course of our campaign, about space. First 3 we said no to. We said yes to Jordan because we wanted to be downtown. We were hearing from West Siders and people downtown. I'm an East Sider. I've been there for 20 years.
So he came to you saying, do you want to
We were in a meeting and he offered it at that time.
Do you think he would have offered the same to Commissioner Hardesty?
No.
But you still don't think it's favoritism?
Is it favoritism or to get future influence? Those are 2 different questions. Sure, it's favoritism. He likes me more than he likes Joanne.
But does favoritism, don't those 2 things go hand in hand?
Not necessarily. I think he would definitely prefer me to be the next city commissioner as opposed to Joanne. No 2 ways about it. That doesn't mean he gets special treatment. I will likely respond to his call if he calls, but that doesn't mean he gets special treatment. There's a difference.
Sophie,
yeah.
Can you ask Renee to offer your thoughts on why you think you got the Fire Bureau, the union's endorsement? For the same reason that Joanne said, that's fine.
They don't feel safe in the city, and they're tired. They don't think we've adequately addressed the challenges in unsheltered, and they're the ones that are first responders time and time again. When there's a fire in an unsanctioned camp, when there's an overdose, they're often the first responders. So they're looking at the status quo as failing to address some really fundamental public safety and really humanitarian crisis on our streets, and that we're not currently on a path to confront them.
So what does one commissioner who's not the police commissioner actually have to offer there? How could you make things different?
Well, one's tone, I think unfortunately at times Joanne's relationship with the police has felt personal, has distracted from the substantive discussions about balancing public safety and police accountability, which is a crucial conversation that we must continue on forever on how to balance those two. But the language has been inflammatory, the relationship has been personal, it appears at times, and taking a step back with a cooler head and trying to balance those two really deep societal needs is important. So calmness at City Council on a tough issue. Second is budget dollars. I mean, I will prioritize hiring more police, and I'm one of 5 votes on that, but I will be a loud advocate for that.
Well, we've had funded positions for years that have gone unfilled, and the police budget today is larger than it was when Hardesty and Udaley were able to cut it a few years ago. So what are you really bringing?
Well, I think you have to look at those hand in hand. I mean, we've had a difficult time recruiting in the city of Portland, partially for our reputation, and in particular in recent years. Public safety officers do not feel supported in this town. They feel like they're constantly on an unfair microscope. They don't fully believe that the process is going to play out fairly here. And there are a lot of county adjoining jurisdictions that will pay less and still attract more police officers than the city of Portland because they feel safer there, they feel better supported.
I will say, before I showed up at City Hall, Portland Police Bureau carried 50 vacancies like every year, right? It was just kind of the slush fund in their budget. So part of what we did, as Mr. Gonzalez calls defunding, was actually removing those positions since they'd never filled them. There's really no need to keep carrying those positions on the books. Today, Portland Police still has over 100 funded positions in their current budget. And it's going to be a while before they can get to the Department of Public Safety standards and practices to get their 18 months of training. It's going to be about a year after that before they're on the street on their own. So if you do the math, what you know is it's going to be years before we actually are able to significantly change the number of officers we have today. My question is, if we're 100 down, what do the 700 plus sworn officers do that we have today? The excuse for not doing anything cannot be we're short-staffed. Everybody at the city is short-staffed, but firefighters don't show up and say, we can't put your fire out because we're short-staffed, call your insurance company. So again, and my job also is to make sure that the Department of Justice settlement agreement is fully implemented. I mean, if you've been following it, what you know is we're not getting better, we're getting worse when it comes to being held accountable by the Department of Justice. And I am the only one on the city council that constantly is like, well, what are we doing about this? What are we doing about this? And that's why my frustration shows up at the federal court with Judge Simon, because we keep painting this picture as if somehow we're like making improvements, and we're not making improvements. And we need someone politely to actually call out what's not happening. The public expects us to make these changes. The DOJ expects us to make these changes. And I'm not going to sit back and pretend that we're actually making progress when we're not. I hold the police, the fire, and every other bureau to the same standards. These are the measurements. Did you reach the measurement? And if not, why not?
So, if you don't mind, I want to just follow up on this with Renee. I think this is an important question. I want to dial down a little bit on police recruitment. What do you think it is that would cause someone to want to be a police officer in the city of Portland? And I'm not asking that question facetiously. You've made the claim, and I think with some evidence, that there's a difficulty recruiting because police officers don't feel appreciated or wanted or respected in the city of Portland. Well, other than making Portlanders like cops more or say thank you or tip their cap on the street, what is it that we could do as a city that would in fact entice them to come work for us?
So starting at City Hall. You know, the language that's used there is important. And when there's an allegation of misconduct against police, that we create space for process. And I know that's not sexy, that's not exciting, but that means not rushing to judge, that we let allegations play their way through the system, so to speak. So some of it's just calmness and not adding fuel to the fire on highly contentious issues. You know, the other pieces that I hear from both fire and police, because on this issue, and it gets back to Nigel's question a little bit, the feeling of futility in the city of Portland and Multnomah County. You arrest and release. I mean, we have some real structural weaknesses in our criminal justice system in the city and county. We don't have enough prosecutors, we don't have enough jail space, we don't have enough public defenders, right? So this means that the number of times you are actually arrest for something and that person ends up on the street a few hours later is incredibly high right now. More fundamentally, we have centered so much of the discussion about criminal justice in our region about things like ending cash bail and how, you know, over incarceration and incarceration rates are too high. I think those are all good discussions to have, but we have moved away from centering victims and the concept of justice in our discussions about public safety in the criminal justice system in our region. And it is to a detriment of our city, and the police see it every day. You know, they arrest someone, they're literally out on the street X number of hours later. They repeat arrest and no real ramifications. The unwillingness to prosecute property crimes in real ways in our region. So one of the practical things we're looking at the city level to address this, because we have this interdependency on the county, there's no two ways about it.
I was going to say, you can't fire Mike Schmidt.
No, you can't. But, you know, 50 years ago, the city had a municipal court, and that allows cities to prosecute at least misdemeanors. You can't prosecute felonies under state law in a municipal court. So we're looking at what are the practicalities of reestablishing that in the city of Portland, really to address two things. One is to reestablish a sense of justice in the system, in the city of Portland. Someone steals your catalytic converter, someone steals your car, someone does low-level vandalism, that they're actually going to face some form of ramifications in the city of Portland, because that feeling is gone. That feeling is gone for police, and that feeling is gone for citizens. Second is that we think it will help drive diversion to addiction services and mental illnesses, because often those municipal courts, they're sometimes called drug courts, depending on how it's structured in other places. You show up, it gets pled down to a violation. You don't show up, there's a bench warrant issued. And on 2 or 3 times that through the system, you're saying you're going to go to jail for 3 months, or you're going to enroll in addiction services. Because again, catalytic converters, a lot of these car thefts, I think there's substantial evidence that it's to drive an addiction, right? It's to feed an addiction. And
it actually drive that guy who owned a home in Lake Oswego. He was living large, his multi-million-dollar home from selling all those catalytic converters. I found that article very interesting because we blame houseless people for all the ills on our streets. And I have to tell you, I laughed out loud when I read the guy with the catalytic converter empire actually was living comfortably in Lake Oswego. So I think what that shows is that we tend to automatically assume that criminal activity and behavior is being caused by people who are, but for grace, houseless. And that was a great example of us maybe should not rush to conclusions about who houseless people are or are not.
I do want to follow up on the municipal court idea. This is the first I've heard of this in this cycle. When was the last time Portland had a municipal court?
Late 60s, early 70s, as near as we can tell.
Who are you in discussions with about it?
A number of retired DAs, and really trying to test the feasibility, what the budget would look like, how we could pilot it.
What sort of crimes?
Well, it can only prosecute misdemeanors under state law. So I think the priorities would be, we're looking at auto thefts and catalytic converters in particular right now.
Would it be an auto-only misdemeanor court?
Not necessarily. I mean, but that's just an area of crime that feels like there's directly impacting a lot of Portlanders right now.
Have you been talking to any people within the city of Portland about it?
I don't know that I've socialized it there. I have to think about that question, to answer that question. So
Mayor's office, Mingus?
I've had conversations with the mayor's office off and on. I've had conversations with Dan Ryan off and on. I'm not sure if I've floated it with either of them. Yeah, this has been kind of independent. You know, it was a brainstorm that came up in a small group like 6 months ago. We kept kicking the tires on it and kind of, you know, we kept coming back to it. Other cities in the region have it, and it's Beaverton has one,
Eugene's had one forever.
Yeah.
It sounds like Beacon, which is a Multnomah County court program that Judge Weiler has been working on for the last couple of years. And the city has invested money on the last 2 budget cycles and trying to make that happen. And it's
Why hasn't that happened? We've had some disagreement about that with people.
I'm not sure. I honestly can't say. I know that as part of the local public safety coordinating council, I've been, you know, just notified of the delays and actually getting it launched. And I think it may be for the reason other people have, like, you know, staffing issues and just trying to actually make sure that when we roll it out right. This was supposed to replace the chairs.
The sobering center.
Yeah. The sobering center.
So, just a quick question. You talked about police and firefighters having to show up during the COVID period.
Well, no, I said police had to show up. I mean, fire had to show
Okay.
up
All right.
constantly, yes.
All right. So, what about city employees? Why aren't they back at work?
Well, they are back at work.
In the buildings? I mean, for instance, the public just paid $212 million to renovate the Portland building, which is sitting basically empty today.
Yeah.
So why hasn't council brought city employees back to work in the offices that the public pays for?
Well, right now, a couple of days a week, we're in the office. There is, and the city has not decided yet what the appropriate number of days are for city workers to be in the office. Let me say, when the survey went to city employees, many city employees weren't happy to think that a reason for them to come back was so that downtown business interests would make money. What I have recommended...
Where do you think tax money comes from? Where do the tax dollars come from that the city council is so adept at spending?
Well, it comes from everything that we do in the city, right? Again, let me just say that what I believe the city should be doing, like a lot of major employers are, is looking at how do we incentivize people to want to be at their desks. For example, what I know is that as housing costs continues to rise, employees are traveling further and further to get to their job. Which means if we can provide transportation support, public transportation supports for employees to be able to remove that barrier, if we can provide child care and senior care support so that we remove that barrier, I think that what we should be doing is looking at how do we make sure that A, we're doing the people's business, right? That's number one, because we're being paid to provide a service. 2, how do we do it in a way that actually reflects the new reality of how people work? No one is like, you know, major businesses aren't taking up that 10,000 square feet Class A office space anymore when 500 square feet will be just fine, right? So the city has to adapt as well. And we are. We're in the process of figuring out what is the right mix. Because what I know is that when you mandate things, people rebel. So I'm trying to incentivize. We talk about incentivizing people to become police officers. We should be incentivizing our low-wage city employees to be able, we should be removing barriers so that they are able to do their job without stressing out about transportation costs, childcare costs. The fact that we renovated the Portland building and there's not one childcare space there, I was like, the first thing we should do is actually provide childcare in the building.
Have you been in those talks with the mayor's office about that?
Constantly.
Did they eliminate, this is probably way off topic, did they eliminate the daycare facility in Portland?
Yep.
That's amazing.
That was stupid, yeah.
Could you two?
I just wondered, do you have a different position or a different point of view on whether city employees should be back in the office?
Well, let's start at the top. I'll be there a majority of the week, if not 5 days a week. 3 to 5 days a week, I'll be there in City Hall. I'll require that of any of my direct reports as a condition to employment. That's your 4 or 5 staffers that you get. It will be a requirement that you are in the City Hall majority of time. The only caveat to that at all in terms of direct reports is if you're out, I'm going to call it in the field, but if you're truly doing constituent services, if you're going to association meetings during the day, that could be an out, but otherwise the expectation is majority of time. As you get into the rank and file, there are some trade-offs there that I think we have to continue to evaluate as a city. If you're front-facing with constituent services, I think it's very, very important that we prioritize getting those folks back into the office as soon as possible. There are people who have accessibility issues. They can't rely on just doing stuff online to get services out of the city. We need those people in City Hall or otherwise reachable and physically attainable for constituents. There are real fundamental safety challenges continuously downtown, and so I don't begrudge workers raising that concern right now. I mean, our office has been vandalized twice in the 3 months that whatever amount of months we've been downtown. Do you have
any idea whether that was politically motivated at all? Do you suspect?
I think the second one was probably not politically motivated because they broke glass in a whole bunch of buildings down the street. The first one, when it happened, it kind of felt like it was politically motivated. Have no proof one way or another, but we were the only building to be hit in the area that we're aware of, so it felt like that was politically motivated. Burglary, I have no idea. Yeah. It felt like there's some folks that were casing the space, and with the benefit of hindsight, we should have been more vigilant in sort of tracking them. But to Nigel, I think there are legitimate public safety concerns with downtown. I think there are legitimate public safety concerns with our public transit right now, and to meet rank and file employees where they're at on that subject, I think we have to continue to do the work to make it feel safer and be safer to be downtown in our public transit. The goal, though, is to get substantial return to in-person down there.
Would you, if you were on council right now and Dan Ryan brought forward an ordinance requiring 3 out of 5 days at the office, would you vote yes?
I think I would lean there right now, Sophie. I mean, could I go back on that if I really felt like there was legitimate, material employment concern that I'm not aware of right now? I don't know if I dig my heels in super hard at this point in time, but I think right now I vote yes for that.
Okay.
You said you do 3 to 5, your personal?
Yeah.
Is that because of public safety that you wouldn't go 5? What's the rationale for you being, say, 3 in a week?
Well, I'd say 3 to 5 to 5 to 5. I mean, for me, I do think there's this kind of alienation from City Hall right now in the city and in the business community, and so if you're spending those other 2 days out in the field somehow connecting with folks,
this is because you'd be elsewhere doing work.
Yeah, I mean taking a step back, just both for government, for business, right? I mean, there has been an acceleration, maybe a decade's worth of acceleration and changes in the way people work during the pandemic, and some of those things may be net benefits. We're certainly seeing some of the downsides to it. The lack of critical mass downtown has substantial financial impacts, and it is most certainly impacting constituent services. I don't think there's any two ways about it. Not being able to go in and talk to someone in person really is disruptive. And so the flip side of that is there net savings to society if folks are working from home a certain percentage of the time? I think we have to ask that question holistically. That's the only reason I'm hedging.
There was a critique that asking people to go back was, what was it? Somebody said it was ableist,
racist,
sexist, bad for the planet. Does that mean that the way we were doing things before was ableist, sexist, racist?
The critique, if unfortunately, in a lot of our discussion around complicated policy discussions, those kind of get to be catchphrases that shut down discussion. Yeah. And so we heard it in schools, we heard it in other things, and So trying to stay focused on what we know about the data.
Yeah, I don't want to get us back off.
Well, let me
track,
just-
but can I reserve some time later to ask about PSEF at some point? Go on.
Well,
Yeah.
we're actually already over the hour.
Oh,
If I may though, I want to respond to that because let me just say, wait, no, you want to ask about PSEF?
No, you guys,
No, go on. Go on.
Your answer on this.
You know, as the first black woman on Portland City Council, and I want you to know just how offensive it is whenever race or sex or ableism comes up, that my opponent sees those as divisive issues. And it cannot be divisive to want equality, to want to be heard, and to want to be respected for the expertise that you bring. That is my biggest fear of what Mr. Gonzalez is selling the public. Yes, we want to be polite, but we don't want to address the racial inequity that exists in our system and in our criminal justice system and in our city of Portland. I mean, I can point you to the city's African American network that says we lost 43% of African American employees since COVID started. And there seems to be no intellectual curiosity about why that is.
City employees?
Yeah, city employees. And honestly, the only people that do real deep research are the volunteers that are on the city's affinity groups. And I would expect human resources to be the one like jumping up and down going, whoa, we got a problem, like check, let's see what's going on. And that does not happen. It takes city employees being brave enough to actually bring that to my attention so that I can help them get their voice heard.
so when you're saying what he's selling, do you mean he's selling something like, let's all just hush up about
So
it?
just be polite and just like
And not-
kumbaya and not address like the elephants that are clearly represented when we have these conversations about who has resources and who doesn't have access to resources.
Sorry.
Can you just quickly up or down tell us how you're going to vote on city's charter reform?
Nope.
You're voting no?
Nope, I'm not going to tell you.
Because
I'm not going to tell you because I don't want my opinion to tip the scale either way.
oh, Joanne, that's not what we hear. What we hear is you oppose it, and you're afraid to tell people you oppose it because you're worried about offending your base. So tell us that we're wrong.
You're wrong. And I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote. Because guess what? I absolutely 110% support the fabulous Charter Review Commissioners and the work they did. And now is the time for them to sell their proposal to the public.
Joanne, no one has ever accused of you of being a retiring flower and not
This is
being
true.
willing to offer your opinion. So it's a little bit suspicious that in a city council race where you're under the gun, that you're not willing to take a stand.
Well, I'm not under the gun. What do you mean under the gun?
Well, the polls suggest you're in more trouble than many incumbents might be. So why is this the one issue that you're unwilling to tell the public?
I'm telling the public I'm supporting the Charter Review Commissioners, and that's what I'm doing. And because when I win and have to implement the charter changes as per voters' outcome, then that's what I will do. But the voters have to weigh it. This is not about your opinion or my opinion. This is about voters. And what I've heard from charter commissioners is they've talked to voters all over the city, and I expect them to make a good choice in both places.
Renee, do you want to?
Right now, I'm a no. I'd like to see Mingus's proposal in October and kind of want to hear the scrutiny of it, because certainly this current proposal has been subject to extensive scrutiny. I'd like to see roughly the same level applied to Mingus's proposal, but right now I'm a no.
What don't you like?
I have substantive and procedural concerns. Procedural, first of all, is the sheer scope of the change that we're trying to implement in 2 years, right? So if this passes, we are so fundamentally restructuring our government in a 2-year cycle. I have very low confidence in the city's ability to implement anything of that scale in terms of complexity. I would have much preferred a more humble and incremental adjustments to form of government, just looking at our ability to implement. Substantively, yes, there are
Do
some.
you have any problem with ranked choice voting in multi-member districts?
I think each of those by themselves probably not, per se. I don't have a particularly. Together, it sounds awfully experimental, and I think you're gonna have a hard time ever getting rid of incumbents. You know, I mean, it's. I think that's the reality of the way this is structured. That you'll have incumbents forever.
We got to wrap up in a couple minutes. So last question will be a little fun thing. But first thing, could you each take 1 minute to tell us why you're the better candidate for this position? Commissioner, we'll start with you.
I'm the better candidate because I've actually already proven that I know how to work at the state, local, regional level, and the federal level to bring resources into this city and to fundamentally change institutions that haven't changed in over 100 years. I'm the right person because I do my homework, I always come prepared, and I'm always working on behalf of working people in the city of Portland.
Thanks, Renee.
And I bring hope, not fear.
You know, I deep ties to the city and deeply vested in its future, raising 3 Portland-born kids in the only city they've known. So at a deep level, I'm committed to preserving and protecting some of the beautiful things about our city and wanted to thrive for another 100 years. I think I clearly define issues and am willing to be data focused, and both the challenges of criminal justice and the unsheltered are complex, multifactorial issues that needs level-headedness and data-centric decision making. I have extended experience in both the private and nonprofit sector and leading small, medium, and large organizations in different functions. And at least under our current form of government, the city commissioner is responsible for overseeing bureaus, at least for the next 2 years. So I will lean on that management experience heavily.
Thanks.
I realize we're already over time, and you'll indulge me with another 5 minutes.
Okay, all right.
I do want to get to PSAP.
Yeah.
So, Commissioner Rubio, your colleague, has introduced a series of reforms, revisions, whatever you want to call them, rehauling of PSAP. Where do you stand on her proposal?
I'm supporting her proposals.
Why?
I'm supporting them because when I envisioned PSAP, we thought 35-40 million would be the maximum amount of dollars that would be accessible and available per year. Now that we're on pace to have $100 million a year, we need to make changes to get that money out into the community quicker and be able to see the impact of the climate mitigation activities that those dollars are geared to address. So I've been working with her, and I'm really supportive. I went with her to the committee meeting to present it to the PSAP committee members, and yeah. So
I heard an interesting idea because it is throwing off so many dollars. Is what if you bonded it? What if you use that tax revenue to bond, bond that money, and then you could take a big chunk and do something really big? Instead of these smaller projects, would you consider, I don't know if you can do that under the statute, but would you consider something like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, I think we'd have to provide major public benefit, right, to address like the climate mitigation, which is what we're trying to do. So like, as an example, with 82nd Avenue, I'm certainly planning to have PBOT partner with PSAP so that we can electrify 82nd Avenue while we're doing all these major transportation improvements. Because what I know is if we start electrification in areas, richer areas of the city, we'll never, ever, ever electrify areas that have a whole lot less resources. So let's take some of these big pots of money and really invest them in ways that 100 years from now, our community will still be benefiting from.
Do you think all the PSAP dollars used so far have been used responsibly?
I haven't evaluated each of the grants, but I will say that I believe that we are building capacity for community-based organizations to do some really big stuff. So, the audit will tell whether or not they've all been used responsibly or not.
Renee, would you change PSAP up?
Yes, I mean, we certainly have some things that PSEF is supposed to be focused on that I agree with. I think, you know, some investment in the tree canopy and truly building.
See, this is the first round of PSEF they didn't give any money to Friends of Trees, and then this round they gave them like $80,000 for a planning grant.
Well, Friends of Trees didn't apply, I believe,
Well,
the
they did
first round.
They did.
They did?
Yeah, they didn't get any money.
Huh?
Yeah, I
They
mean,
get a planning grant this time. But that's a big criticism. Is like trees are a pretty proven technology for removing carbon from the atmosphere, and why isn't there more canopy work being done by PSEF? Sorry.
yeah, and the other dimension of climate change is really developing local resilience to it, right? And the importance of the tree canopy, not just in decarbonizing, but cooling far east Portland. I mean, it's this pretty substantial concern. And so that is a gap, but I'm aligned in terms of the original directive.
But you wouldn't change the program fundamentally if your call for it.
I mean, I think the auditor's report raised a number of substantial concerns in the way it is administered and designed. And so I take those critiques very, very seriously. I think, you know, at times it's felt like a boondoggle out of the gate, you know,
Did you vote for it?
I should know the answer to that question. I don't remember, to be honest
Would
with
you
you.
vote for it now?
No,
Wouldn't do it again?
absolutely not.
Why? Because I mean, you don't have like. Can you be more explicit about why you wouldn't vote for it and your criticisms of it?
It is taxed way more dollars than any of us expected, and out of the gate, it had much less oversight than would have been hoped for in a city that once worked.
Even with Rubio's, let's say Rubio's reforms are passed, would you still vote no?
Sophie, I don't know yet. I saw the article on her proposed changes. I have appreciation for them at a high level, but I haven't really studied all the, you know, I haven't really thought through all the implications of what she's proposing. But if you were to ask me if I'm going back in time and knowing what I know now about the program, I would be a hard no on it as was proposed.
Can you name one or two particular grants that you feel were misplaced?
Well, the one out of the gate to the Big Fund.
Okay, but the less obvious ones. That's.
Well, I mean, are we providing financing for things like air conditioning, right? I mean, air conditioning is a important piece of local resilience to climate change. But what does that have to do with clean energy, right? So there are some explicit dollars that have gone towards air conditioning. You know, to me, there's just like this. There's this inconsistency. Are we trying to build local resilience, or are we trying to drive clean energy? So those would be some of the examples. I mean, I worry about some of the dollars towards headquarters for nonprofits. I worry about just the sheer volume of dollars going to what were formerly small organizations that are now expected to be 3-4 times that size with these dollars floating in.
Which organizations in particular do you?
I mean, just look at anyone who's substantially grown their budget. You know, I mean, I think Better
Can you
Days.
name a couple of them?
I mean, what's the Better Days is pretty substantial size growth. You know, I think. I haven't scrutinized closely, but the Street Roots proposal for their headquarters, I mean, these are substantial dollars going to organizations without any track record of managing anything close to that size of budgets. Anybody who's getting 2 to 3 times their pre-existing budget is an area of concern across the board.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions before we do fun question? No? Okay. All right, fun question. If the world was ending tomorrow, what's the last food, not meal, what's the last food you would eat? Commissioner?
Dark chocolate.
Just straight dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
Okay. Renee?
Migas. It's a Tex-Mex meal where you corn tortilla and eggs and lots of vegetables.
What? Migas?
Migas.
MIGAS,
Okay.
very good.
Okay. All right. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
Did we get